From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday Edition. This week, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe v. Wade, meaning there is no longer a federal constitutional right to an abortion. Going forward, abortion rights will be determined by the states, unless Congress were to act on that. In a moment, we'll be speaking with Planned Parenthood Association, Utah. But my first guest on this ruling today is State Senator Dan McCay. And Dan, it wasn't long ago that you and I were talking about this, anticipating it, talking about Utah's trigger law. Is there anything about what unfolded Friday that has surprised you? There were several things that kind of caught me a little bit and tweaked my interest, but I'm curious your take.
Well, the first thing that was surprising to me was that the Chief Justice was on the majority side, right? And that was, I don't think anybody really knew where he was going to be. They knew that he was kind of in play as to which side he was going to land on. And he's even said, publicly, I think he preferred upholding the Mississippi approach and leaving Roe in place.
Right, because on one hand, it's a 6-3, and the other one, it's a 5-4.
Yeah.
And it's because he basically gave himself a split decision.
Yeah, which shows the difficulty of being a Chief Justice in the Supreme Court. It is hard to be in the majority and weigh at the same time the impacts of all of the decisions that you're making. Most people don't realize, but the Supreme Court has released several opinions that were just unanimous. So there was not like a partisan or ideology divide. And this one certainly is much more closely maybe partisan or ideologically oriented. And so the Chief Justice, I think, always is concerned about the court and managing the long-term influence of the court.
He's kind of the keeper of the tablets and the guarder of the gate and basically the reputation of the court. And some of the criticism that I've heard, depending on what the decision is, either by the right or by the left, is, wow, there's way too much politics that has seeped into the court. It's supposed to be apolitical. We're supposed to simply weigh an issue against the Constitution. Do you feel that? And I tend to think I'm noticing it in my lifetime, a little bit more of a political sway to the court.
Yeah, see, and that's interesting that you say that. I don't know what the condition was of the country in 1973. I was -1 years old at the time.
Right.
And, I'm not sure what the temper was when the original decision was handed down in the Roe case. But I can tell you that these types of issues come and go. And while they seem to have, a large political impact, there are still very few people and there are still very few abortions in this country. And fortunately, after this, we're hoping that there will be fewer. But these partisan issues really aren't the bread and butter of what the Supreme Court is working on. And I'm hopeful that people recognize the benefits of all of the other issues that they're working on and don't miss those as well. But every once in a while, there is a decision like this that catches the attention of the country and feels like there's partisan divides.
I obviously want to talk about how Utah is going to handle it, the trigger law that we have talked about before, because different states, I mean, boy, for some, what was legal at 8 o'clock was not necessarily legal at 8:10 on Friday morning. But we'll talk about that in a minute. One thing that caught my attention was Justice Alito, who wrote the majority opinion, seemed to go out of his way to say, don't overread this. I mean, this is about abortion, and other things are not affected by this ruling, but yet Justice Thomas is going, well, maybe not. And he's going, maybe we ought to reconsider gay marriage, maybe we ought to reconsider contraception, maybe we ought to reconsider. Does that concern you at all?
Well, the Oberfeld decision was one decision that was largely citing Roe v. Wade as its precedence to overturn Loras v. Texas, and then even further, allow for, gay marriage and the striking down of the Defense of Marriage Act at the time. What's really interesting, and I think when Alito looks at that, or Justice Alito looks at that, is he's trying to keep America focused on this one issue and how it impacts, and less trying to broaden the scope and look at it as something much broader, and in some people's perspective, much worse. Because I think you look at some of those decisions, it would send a ripple throughout the country and really cause some structural issues potentially. And I think Justice Alito is wise to say, let's focus on the fact pattern we have, let's focus on the case we have, and the next issues when it comes, we'll deal with that as well.
It was interesting as I listened to some of the rhetoric on Friday, and boy, some of it was near hysterics, and other parts was, I think, a gross oversimplification. Don't worry, be happy. It's just filtered now to the states, and the wit and wisdom of our local legislators and whatever will prevail. There's nothing to worry about. Move on. Nothing to see here. I think somewhere in between is the real truth. Are you concerned about some of the things that people are talking about? Well, how difficult is it going to be for a woman? What about those who choose to go out of state? Already we've had major corporations, everything from Disney and Amazon and everything else, saying, hey, we're going to provide this as a benefit, you know, because for some women, especially those who are in the lower socioeconomic realms of our society, for them to travel out of state and everything else is going to be a burden. And then there's the concern that some states, even beyond what seems to be acceptable in the state of Utah, primarily because of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, incest, rape, and the health of the mother, some states are going way beyond that. So are there real things that we need to kind of keep an eye on?
Well, there's, and it goes beyond that as well, Doug. When you think about our laws, we have several laws on the books from 1960 still in action as they relate to abortion.
Are those the zombie laws?
Yeah, and so you look back, once the Supreme Court speaks, if it's still culturally popular to have that law in place, we haven't repealed some of those. So we're actually going back and we need to look at our abortion statutes from the 60s and make sure that what we've passed today is consistent with then, and probably update all of it and bring it all into one consistent meaning. So that's just one example.
Senator McCay, in the last segment, we just have a minute or so, but let's talk about Utah's trigger law, the mechanism, what has happened, and we are hearing that this is already a done deal.
Yeah, so the trigger basically says that if the Supreme Court says that a ban is possible at the state level, which it did, and Legislative Management and Research has now sent a letter to, Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel, a nonpartisan group of attorneys that services the legislature, has reviewed the decision and said, yes, in fact, Supreme Court has said the state is in control and a ban is applicable, and as a result, abortions are prohibited from today.
Right. So this is a done deal because it was Governor Herbert, wasn't it, who signed that?
It was Governor Herbert.
Exactly. Senator McCay, as always, thank you so much
for
joining us as we have this breaking news over the weekend, and we look forward to future conversations with you.
Look forward to it.
All right, Senator Dan McCay with us. We will be right back, and Planned Parenthood will be our guest on Sunday Edition. And now reacting to the decision by the Supreme Court of the United States to the overturning of Roe v. Wade is the CEO and the president of Planned Parenthood Association of Utah. Carey Galloway is with us. And Carrie, we were just chatting. We've had a lot of conversations over the years, and I'm just going to ask you straight up, did you ever, years ago, did you believe that this day really would come?
Yeah. I knew that there was a possibility, but I didn't think it happens. I didn't think that the Supreme Court would overturn almost 50 years of precedent.
People have asked me over the years what I thought, and my attitude was always, I don't think we'll ever put this genie back in the bottle. I still wonder if we're really ultimately going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle, but I have to admit, over the last couple of years, you kind of have seen the handwriting on the wall. What do you think has brought us to this point today? And then we'll get your thoughts on some specifics and some of the things that are being said at the national level. What brought us to today?
Well, it's hard for me to say because it doesn't make any sense to me, Doug. I have worked my entire career for the health and welfare of women, mothers, families, people who can get pregnant, to have the strongest family that they can and be the best contributors to society and the community they live in. And to do that, people have to make their own decisions with their own circumstances. And for me, the arrogance of some elected officials to say that their morals are better than my morals, and so they get to make family decisions for me. It just doesn't work. And so it's very hard for me to explain why someone else thinks they get to make decisions for me and my family.
It's been interesting back in Washington, D.C. We've heard all kinds of things. Those that are going, hey, this isn't that big a deal. We are just nobody's taking any rights away. We are simply transferring it back to where it should have been, and it always should have been, and that is to the states. On the other side, we are hearing, and I want to kind of get this exact, that this is opening a legal civil war between the states. When you think of and anticipate the ramifications of this and where we'll be here in 3 months and 5 months and maybe 2 years from now, where will we be? What kind of changes are you anticipating? As you mentioned, with your legacy in this arena, what is going to happen? What do you envision?
Well, I think people are going to have to put their money where their mouth is, the old adage. The reason, supposedly, that the state of Utah has done a trigger law that they hope to certify today or tomorrow is because they believe in families. And they believe in the rights of the unborn. Those are lofty and wonderful goals. And as I go to the legislature every session, I watch them cast aside possible legislation that would strengthen those families. For the past 3 years, they have had an opportunity to expand Medicaid, family planning, the most critical health invention to reduce the need for abortion, to expand Medicaid family planning to people who can't afford it in Utah. And they have rejected it, Doug, 3 years in a row. They weren't willing to help women or people who can get pregnant to plan their families. I watch each year as the advocates for maternal and child health ask for more services, more money to help families be able to raise their children in the best way possible. And we don't do it. We don't fund those programs. You know, I'm getting to an age where you got to do something to help me believe that the reason you're taking away a woman and her family rights shows that you care about people, not just that you want to be the boss of everybody else.
There's a conversation that is going on now, and it primarily comes from one of the opinions from one of the justices in the Supreme Court, because you mentioned family planning and how, in your words, that really could perhaps prevent some of the needs for abortion. But already, Justice Thomas has opened the door and has basically said that there should be reconsideration of some of the rulings from the Supreme Court on contraception and also even on same-sex marriage. As if I imagine for you, for your organization and so on, what happened on Friday is not making it a tough enough day. I would assume the comments from Justice Thomas are a little frightening as well.
Frightening, depressing, and very angering. Because again, why does he get to be the boss of someone else? Because he morally believes that way. To be honest, it just blows my mind.
Yeah. We could talk for an hour, and unfortunately, we are out of time today. Carrie, I appreciate the conversations we've had over the years, and I appreciate the information you've brought to the table, and we'll look for other opportunities, especially as this does unfold, not only here in the state of Utah, but around the country, and either boundaries are kind of drawn or battle lines are being drawn. We'll undoubtedly be chatting again, but thank you for joining us this morning on Sunday Edition.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, because be assured, Doug, Planned Parenthood will not give up.
We have so much more coming up on the program. Stay with us this morning on Sunday Edition. In just a few days, Utahns will be heading to the polls or making sure that they've turned in their ballots to cast the vote in Utah's Republican primary election. And joining me right now to talk about the election in our state is the State Director of Elections, Ryan Cowley. And Ryan, welcome to Sunday Edition. Let's talk about some of the do's and don'ts. First and foremost, for this upcoming primary election, it's a Sunday morning right now. Is it too late to mail our ballots?
It's not too late. The postmark deadline is tomorrow. If you are dropping it in a drop box, make sure you check. There's a tag on every mailbox that the post office has. Make sure that that's something that will be collected and postmarked. The safest thing to do is to walk into the post office and ask for a hand stamp. And if you're in the area, obviously go to a drop box and put it in the drop box. You have until 8 o'clock on Tuesday night to put that in a drop box.
Are the ballots pretty much universal throughout the state, regardless of what precinct or what county that you live in?
No, they're not. There's quite a few different races. Some of the counties and some of the areas will have local school boards. Some of them have county clerk races, different legislative races. Statewide, there's the Senate race. There's congressional races, and in the Salt Lake area, there are some Democratic legislative races as well.
Right, I recognize that. I didn't phrase that well, but what I was referring to, the actual format and the instructions and what you do and how you do it and where you sign, is that pretty much universal?
Yeah, that is very standard across the counties. There's small differences, but the concept and the way the ballots look are very similar across the state.
What are some of the most common mistakes that people make when they are filling out and then mailing their ballots or turning them in?
Some of the most common mistakes we see on the ballots are forgetting to sign the envelope, or sometimes they'll grab somebody else in the household and start to sign it and then realize that they're signing the wrong envelope. So it's kind of those house swap things. So just make sure you check the outside of the envelope, see what name's on it, and then just make sure you sign that ballot to get it in and have it be counted.
There's quite a bit of rumbling right now, and a lot of it is kind of leftover spillover from the past election and casting doubt on whether or not we are really counting the votes accurately, whether or not the elections are fair. I know every time I have brought this up with our current lieutenant governor, past lieutenant governors here in the state of Utah, I've sensed a real bristling at that, at least here in our state. Are our elections sound? Are they secure?
I believe they are, yes. And I've been doing elections since 2005 in 2 different counties and now being at the state level. And they absolutely are sound. There's a lot of protections in place, a lot of transparency, and a lot of checks and balances and audits that go into ensuring that the way that the ballots are counted on election night really do reflect the intent that the voters cast them with.
There are those who say it ought to go back to, quote unquote, the good old days, the days we could rely on, when everybody voted on the same day and everything was a paper ballot and there was face-to-face with the election judges right there on the site. It was years ago, it was actually Governor Huntsman that asked me to be on a committee that he put together, a commission to look into the democracy in the state of Utah. We traveled all over the place to figure out why people were so derelict, honestly, in participating in the political process, but particularly in voting, because we had, at that time, this was obviously years ago with Governor Huntsman, but there had been such a drop in participation in the state of Utah. And a lot of the things that we vote on the same day, we have a paper ballot folks are talking about, those are the things that we saw the most concern over. Give us more latitude, give us more time, give us options so we can vote. If I work all day, if I'm in an emergency room at a hospital, I can't be there. If I'm a mom at home taking care of the kids, you know, we have to split up the family in order to properly vote. Would it be a good idea? And some of the candidates that are running right now are advocating, no, it's back to the good old days. We go on one day, we show up in person, and we have a paper ballot.
Yeah, there definitely is some noise out there about that. One thing that I would caution against is we don't get to where we are by accident. We've evolved to this point through a meticulous, thoughtful process. You were part of that committee that studied the effect of, you know, how we vote on voting. And going back to the good old days, you know, there's some things that are positive about that, but there's also some problems with that. No system that we have is without problems. And I feel like, you know, access to the ballot doesn't mean, you know, we have to go away from vote by mail. And we can secure the way that we do elections. I think we do a great job here in Utah. There's always room for improvement. We saw that with several bills this year that the Lieutenant Governor's office worked closely with local election officials, with the legislature, with advocacy groups, because we want to make sure that we have the proper controls in place. But I don't think taking a step back in time is necessarily the right thing to do at this point in time.
Ryan, let's address the paper ballot issue. Every time I've talked about this with yourself and others, they gently remind me, we do have paper ballots. There is a paper trail. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely, yes. Every vote that's cast is on a paper ballot by mail, and there's a full audit that occurs after the election. So it really is a paper auditable election.
Just a real quick final question. There's a lot of things that have been coming down national and even international news, including rulings from the Supreme Court. There are those on both sides of the issues, those who are for what had happened, those who are against what has happened, who are saying that this is going to motivate people to cast a vote in 2022 in the off year or the midterm elections. Do you believe that'll be the case here in the state of Utah? Are you ramping up for a bigger turnout?
Yeah, we've had really high turnout the last two presidential elections, and in 2018 that was a midterm election with cannabis and some of the other things on the ballot. So I think we've had some really high turnout. But yes, you know, these are issues that are deep, emotional, and personal to people. And obviously, one of the most American things that we can do to express our opinions is be able to cast and express our opinion through the votes that we do. And so, you know, that we have an opportunity with the primary coming up and in November. So we definitely expect people to express their opinions and make their voices known through the ballot box.
Ryan, as always, thank you so much for joining us today on Sunday Edition. And that does it for our program. Stay with us because music and the spoken word, that's coming up next.